The little church smelled of lemon polish and old hymnals, exactly like Naomi had promised it would. Alexander sat in the third pew from the back, left side, hand locked in hers so tightly his knuckles were white. Every muscle in his body screamed from the 23 steps it had taken to get here, but the pain felt holy now, like penance and baptism all at once. The pastor, a short woman with silver locks and a voice like thunder wrapped in velvet, preached on the prodigal son who came home limping, broke and beloved anyway. Alexander cried through the entire sermon. Naomi never let go. When the service ended, people came, not to gawk at the billionaire, but to lay gentle hands on his shoulders and say, "Welcome home, son." One elderly deacon pressed a butterscotch candy into his palm like he was 7 years old. Outside on the cracked front steps, sunlight poured warm and gold over Brownsville. Naomi faced him, eyes shining. "You walked in," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might make it untrue. "Barely," he laughed, wet and shaky. "I'm pretty sure I'm going to fall on my face leaving." "Then I'll catch you," she said. "That's the deal now." Alexander looked at her, at the woman who had seen him at his ugliest and stayed anyway, and felt something inside him finally settle into place. "Naomi Harper," he said, voice rough with everything he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in the dark, "I don't have a ring yet. I don't have a plan that makes sense. I still wake up some nights thinking I hear screaming tires. But I know one thing with every cell that's left in me, I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to stand, really stand, beside you. Will you marry me?" Not the billionaire. Not the tragedy. Just Alexander. The man who's finally trying. Naomi's answer was to kiss him right there on the church steps in front of God and half the neighborhood, slow and deep and certain. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she breathed. 1,000 times yes. 6 months later. The garden behind the women's shelter in the Bronx had been transformed. White chairs in neat rows. Fairy lights strung through apple trees. A simple wooden arch wrapped in daisies, Lillian's favorite. Naomi walked down the aisle on the arm of the shelter's oldest resident, Miss Lorraine, who declared herself honorary mama of the bride. She wore a dress the color of sunrise, simple and radiant, locks crowned with baby's breath. Alexander waited beneath the arch, no wheelchair today. Leg braces hidden beneath a midnight blue suit. Forearm crutches wrapped in white ribbon. He swayed, exhausted but upright. Dr. Vasquez stood 2 feet behind him, ready to catch if his legs gave out. They didn't. When Naomi reached him, he took her hands and whispered so only she could hear, "I walked for you." She smiled through tears. "I always knew you would." They wrote their own vows. Alexander first. "Naomi, you found me when I was ashes and dared to believe there was still a man inside. You taught me that healing doesn't mean the scars disappear. It means you stop hiding them. I promise to keep choosing you, choosing us, choosing life, every single day I'm given. And when I fall, because I will, I promise to let you help me up." Naomi's turn. "Alexander, I thought love was something I'd already had and lost forever. Then you let me sit in the dark with you and I found it again, bigger, braver, truer. I promise to keep the porch light on, to keep singing when the storms come, to keep believing for both of us on the days you can't. And I promise that every step you take from this day forward, I will be right beside you, not carrying you, walking with you." Miss Lorraine handed Naomi the something old, the tiny pink sneaker, now cleaned and tied with a white ribbon. She tucked it into Alexander's suit pocket over his heart. "Something borrowed from your little girl," Miss Lorraine said. "She's here today. Look at all these daisies." They kissed before the pastor even told them to, long, slow homecoming. Later, at the reception under the fairy lights, Alexander, legs trembling with fatigue, danced the first dance standing. Naomi held him up and he held her and they swayed to "His Eye is on the Sparrow," the same song from the blizzard night. When his knees finally buckled, she caught him exactly like she promised, eased him into the waiting chair and kept dancing, now sitting in his lap, forehead to forehead, laughing through happy tears. 1 year after that. A small dedication ceremony in the shelter garden. Alexander cut the ribbon on the new children's wing, the Lillian Grace Kingston Rehabilitation Playground. State-of-the-art equipment for kids learning to walk again after accidents, illness, anything. He walked the entire length of the playground unassisted, slow, careful, beautiful steps, while Naomi stood at the end, arms open. A little girl in pigtails, new resident, spinal injury, watched wide-eyed from her own tiny walker. Alexander knelt, painfully, triumphantly, in front of her. "One day," he said, voice thick, "you're going to run so fast the wind can't catch you. And when you do, remember this, somebody believed in you before you believed in yourself." The little girl looked past him to Naomi and whispered, "Like Miss Naomi believed in you?" Alexander smiled, tears falling freely now. Exactly like that. That night, in their brownstone in Brooklyn, close enough to the shelter, far enough from the tower, Alexander and Naomi stood on their own tiny balcony watching thunderstorms roll in over the city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. No chair, no braces, just a man standing with his wife. "Thank you," he whispered into her locks. "For what?" "For helping me walk." Naomi turned in his arms, kissed him soft and slow. "Anytime, Mr. Kingston." Lightning flashed, illuminating them both. And somewhere, a little girl with pigtails smiled in her sleep, dreaming of running through fields of daisies, her daddy finally keeping up. Love at last. Unexpected. Unbreakable. True. If this story touched you, do 3 things for me in the comments. 1. Type, "I needed this today," if you did. 2. Tell me which moment broke you the hardest. 3. Tag someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to stand again. Thank you for letting me tell you this one. Now go love somebody who's still sitting in the dark. They're waiting for you to turn the light on. The richest man in the city rolled his wheelchair past the night shift janitor mopping the marble floor, and she looked up with tired eyes and said, "One day, Mr. Kingston, I'll help you walk again." He laughed, until the impossible started happening. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. A paralyzed billionaire CEO, hardened by loss and pride, crosses paths with a humble, faith-filled black janitor working the midnight shift in his skyscraper. The central event is her outrageous, gentle promise, "I'll help you walk," that he instantly dismisses. The emotional core is unexpected love born from radical belief in someone else's healing when they've stopped believing in themselves. Setting, a gleaming corporate tower after hours. Tone, tender, slow-burn redemptive romance with quiet miracles. Theme, love at last against every odd. I'm ready to begin writing the full 8,500 to 9,000 word story in parts. Here is Act 1, Dual Introduction, 1,038 words. Shall I continue to Act 2 once you approve? #### Act 1, Dual Introduction. The elevator doors slid open on the 72nd floor at 2:17 a.m. with a whisper that felt louder than gunfire in the sleeping tower. Alexander Kingston wheeled himself out, the low hum of the chair's motor the only sound in the cathedral-quiet executive corridor. The city glittered beyond the glass like scattered diamonds on black velvet, indifferent to the man who owned half of it. His reflection stared back from the darkened windows, sharp jaw clenched, steel-gray eyes hollow, the tailored midnight blue suit doing nothing to hide the useless legs folded beneath the cashmere blanket. He hated coming up here after hours. The silence reminded him he was still breathing when everything else in him had died 3 years ago on a rain-slicked road in Switzerland. But sleep was a traitor, and the office was the only place the nightmares couldn't follow. He rolled past the empty reception desk, past the abstract sculptures no one understood, and into his private office that could swallow a house. The motion sensors bathed the room in soft gold light. He parked beside the floor-to-ceiling window, poured 2 fingers of 50-year Macallan he didn't taste anymore, and watched Manhattan blink below him like it was trying to remember his name. Down on the 43rd floor, in the staff locker room that smelled of bleach and lemon polish, Naomi Harper tied her locks back with a rubber band that had once been red. She was 41, bone-tired, and still humming an old Mahalia Jackson song under her breath. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired angels. She slipped on the Navy janitor's jumpsuit that hung loose on her narrow shoulders, zipped it to the throat, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. "One more night, Lord," she whispered. "One more night and we'll make the rent." Her knees ached from yesterday's double shift, her left hand still carried the faint scar from the glass she'd broken last week, but her eyes, dark, warm, ancient, still held light. People said she looked like she knew secrets the rest of the world had forgotten. She pushed her cleaning cart into the service elevator, pressed 72, and leaned her forehead against the cool metal wall. The building always felt different after midnight, like it let its shoulders down and told the truth. The elevator climbed. Alexander heard the faint ding long before the doors opened. He knew the sound of every machine in this tower. This one carried the night crew. He considered retreating to the hidden bedroom behind his office, but pride, or exhaustion, kept him at the window. Naomi stepped out, pushing the cart ahead of her like a shield. She saw him immediately, backlit against the city, glass in hand, motionless as a statue carved from grief. She had seen him before, of course. Everyone in the building had. The tragic billionaire. The man who never smiled. The ghost who haunted his own empire. She started to turn the card around. Employees weren't supposed to disturb the executive floor when Mr. Kingston was present. Company legend said he once fired a VP for breathing too loudly. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way his shoulders curved inward, like he was trying to fold himself small enough to disappear. Maybe it was the untouched whiskey trembling in his hand. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit whispering, "Speak." She cleared her throat softly. "Good evening, Mr. Kingston." He didn't turn. "It's 2 in the morning." His voice was low, clipped, expensive. It cut. Naomi's fingers tightened on the card handle. "Yes, sir. I'll come back later?" "No," the word surprised them both. He finally looked at her, really looked. She was smaller than he expected, the jumpsuit swallowing her frame, name tag crooked, and Harper. Her eyes didn't flinch from his the way most people's did when they saw the chair. She waited. Alexander felt something sharp and unfamiliar move in his chest. Annoyance, maybe, or recognition. "You're new," he said. It wasn't true. She'd been cleaning this building for 8 years. But billionaires rarely see the people who keep their world spotless. "No, sir," she answered gently. "Just usually invisible." The honesty landed between them like a living thing. He opened his mouth to dismiss her, to return to the safety of silence, but the words that came out were foreign and raw. "Do you ever sleep?" The question startled them both. Naomi smiled, small and real. "When the Lord decides rent ain't due." A humorless laugh escaped him, more exhale than sound. He spun the chair to face her fully. "You believe that? That he decides?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her cart, pulled out a clean microfiber cloth, and began wiping fingerprints from the glass conference table that no one had used in months. Her movements were slow, deliberate, reverent. "I believe he sees," she said finally, not looking up. "Even when we stop looking back." Alexander felt the air shift, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed for years. Naomi finished the table, moved to the sculpture near his desk, a twisted bronze thing that cost more than she made in a decade, and dusted it with the same care she might give a church altar. She paused, studying the sculpture, then him. Something brave and quiet rose in her eyes. "Mr. Kingston," she said softly, "one day I'm going to help you walk again." The glass stopped halfway to his lips. He stared at her, at this woman who smelled like lemon cleaner and midnight, who dared to stand in his tower and speak impossibility like it was already done. Then he laughed. It was harsh, hollow, cruel. "Get out," he said. Naomi didn't move. Her gaze held steady, ancient and unafraid. "I mean it," she whispered. "I'll help you walk." For one heartbeat, something flickered across Alexander's face. Terror, maybe, or hope so old it hurt. Then the mask slammed back down. "Leave," he ordered, voice like winter. Naomi lowered her eyes, pushed the cart toward the elevator. But just before the doors closed, she looked back. "I'll be praying for you, sir," she said. "Whether you want it or not." The doors shut. Up in his office, Alexander sat motionless for a long time, the city glittering below, the echo of her promise burning like a brand against bone. He didn't know it yet, but everything had already begun to change. 3 nights later, the storm came in like judgment. Rain lashed the glass walls of Kingston Tower in horizontal sheets, thunder rolling so low it rattled the fillings in your teeth. The city had lost power below 14th Street, but the building's private generators hummed on, bathing the 72nd floor in cold emergency light. Alexander hadn't left since Monday. He told his assistant he was working. In truth, he hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch since the janitor's impossible words. "I'll help you walk again." They looped in his skull like a broken record, mocking him every time he shifted the dead weight of his legs. At 2:43 a.m. the private elevator opened again. Naomi stepped out soaked to the bone, jumpsuit clinging dark and heavy, locks dripping onto the marble. A plastic grocery bag hung from her wrist. The storm had flooded the subway, buses weren't running. She had walked 22 blocks in the deluge because rent was due tomorrow and pride wouldn't let her miss a shift. She didn't expect him to still be here. Alexander's chair was angled toward the window, silhouetted by lightning. Empty bottle on the desk. Another half full. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled high, revealing the pale scars that ran like lightning bolts down both forearms, souvenirs from surgeons trying to piece him back together after the crash. He didn't turn when the elevator dinged. I told you to stay off this floor, he said to the glass. Naomi's shoes squelched. Water pooled around her worn sneakers. She should have apologized and retreated. Instead she stood there, shivering, watching the proud line of his shoulders tremble, not from cold. Storm's bad, she said quietly. I noticed. Silence stretched, broken only by rain and the low growl of thunder. She took one step forward. Then another. The grocery bag rustled. Alexander spun the chair so fast the wheels squealed. What part of leave me alone is complicated, Miss Harper? His voice cracked on her name like he hadn't meant to remember it. Naomi didn't flinch. She opened the bag, pulled out a small foil-wrapped bundle and set it on the corner of his desk. Steam curled up, carrying the smell of warm cornbread and something spicy. My mama always said nobody should be alone in a storm, she said. Even kings. He stared at the food like it might bite him. I'm not hungry. Your stomach's been growling loud enough to drown out the thunder for the last hour. Heat flooded his face. He hadn't realized she'd been watching from the reflection in the window. Naomi took a slow breath, the kind you take before you jump off a cliff. Mr. Kingston. Alexander. The first name slipped out soft, reverent, like she'd been carrying it in her mouth for days. His eyes snapped to hers, electric and dangerous. I know you think I'm crazy, she went on, voice steady even while her hands shook from cold. But 3 years ago I watched my husband die in a hospital bed while doctors told me there was no hope. I know what hopeless sounds like. And sir, that sound is coming out of you every single night you sit up here alone. Alexander's knuckles went white on the armrests. You don't know me, he said through his teeth. I know you haven't left this building in 79 days. I know you fired your last physical therapist because he said, maybe one day. I know you keep a loaded gun in the top left drawer and you take it out every time the clock hits 3. Her voice never rose. It simply filled the room like warm light. He couldn't breathe. Naomi stepped closer until she stood directly in front of the chair. Rainwater dripped from her lashes. I'm not a doctor, she whispered. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a woman who still believes God can use broken people to fix broken people. She reached out, slow, telegraphed, and laid her hand on his knee. The dead one. The one that hadn't felt touch in 3 years. Alexander jerked like she'd burned him, but he didn't pull away. I'm going to help you walk again, she said again, softer this time, like a lullaby and a battle cry all at once. Not because I'm special. Because you're tired of sitting? For one endless second, the storm outside disappeared. Alexander looked at her hand, small, calloused, trembling from cold, resting on the leg that had betrayed him. Something ancient and ferocious cracked open in his chest. Then terror roared in and he shoved her hand away so hard she stumbled. Get out, he roared, voice raw. Get the hell out. Naomi caught herself on the desk. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks, but her eyes never left his. I'll be back tomorrow night, she said quietly. And the night after that. Until you're ready. She walked to the elevator. The doors closed on her soaked, unbroken silhouette. Alexander sat shaking, fists clenched so tight his nails drew blood from his palms. He stared at the cornbread cooling on his desk. Steam no longer rose from it, but the smell lingered, sweet, impossible, alive. He didn't touch the gun that night. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, he cried, ugly, silent sobs that tasted like surrender. Outside, lightning split the sky, and somewhere deep in the building, a janitor prayed through chattering teeth that tomorrow he would let her stay long enough to begin. When was the last time someone saw the real you, the hurting you, and refused to look away? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. The next 4 nights were war. Alexander had security change the executive elevator codes. Naomi took the stairs, 72 flights with a bad knee and a cart she left on the service floor. He had the night guard posted outside his office. She waited until the guard's shift break, slipped past with a soft, God bless you baby, that left the man too stunned to stop her. He stopped sleeping entirely, just to make sure she wouldn't catch him vulnerable again. But every night at 2:17 a.m. the private elevator opened anyway, and there she was, dry now, locks twisted into a neat bun, carrying something small wrapped in foil or tucked in a paper bag. Night 1, a slice of sweet potato pie. Night 2, a tiny bottle of frankincense oil she set on his desk without a word. Night 3, a single white candle she lit and placed by the window, whispering, for the dark you're carrying. He met her each time with colder weapons. Harassment is grounds for termination. Do you have any idea how many laws you're breaking? I will ruin your life, Miss Harper. I swear it. She never argued. She simply looked at him with those ancient eyes, left her offering, and disappeared before he could have her physically removed. By the fifth night, Alexander was unraveling. He sat in the dark. No lights, no city glow, just the red exit sign bleeding across the marble. He had taken the batteries out of his chair so she would think he'd left the floor. He waited like a sniper, gun in his lap this time, finger resting beside the trigger, not to hurt her, never that, but to scare her so completely she would finally leave him alone. The elevator dinged. Naomi stepped out carrying no gift tonight. Just herself. She walked straight through the crimson dark until she stood 3 feet from him. Close enough to see the gun. Alexander raised it with a hand that shook from exhaustion and fury. "Next word out of your mouth," he said, voice shredded, "and I call the police. I will have you arrested. I will make sure you never work in this city again. Do you understand me?" Naomi looked at the gun, then at him. No fear. Only sorrow so deep it felt like drowning. "I understand you're scared," she said softly. "I'm not scared," he shouted, and the lie cracked the air like a whip. She took 1 step closer. He thumbed the safety off. Naomi knelt, slowly, deliberately, until she was eye level with the barrel. "Then shoot me, Alexander," she whispered. "If believing you can be whole again is such a crime, go ahead and end it. But you won't. Because even you know the only person dying up here is you." The gun wavered. Tears, hot, furious, traitorous, burned down his cheeks. "Get up," he choked. "Not until you put that thing down. I will kill you." "No," she said, gentle as breath. "You're too busy killing yourself and you're tired of it." Silence screamed between them. Alexander's arm dropped. The gun clattered to the marble. He folded forward, forehead pressing hard against the cool armrest of his dead chair, shoulders shaking with sobs he couldn't stop. Naomi didn't move to touch him. She simply stayed on her knees in the red dark, a quiet witness to the moment a man's walls finally crumbled. After an eternity, his voice came out small, broken, young. "Why won't you leave me alone?" She answered like it was the simplest truth in the world. "Because Jesus never left me alone in my worst night. And I'm too stubborn to do less for you." He laughed then, wet, desperate, disbelieving. "You think God cares about a man who stopped believing the night his wife and daughter burned?" Naomi's breath caught. She hadn't known the details. Only the rumors. "I think," she said carefully, "God cared enough to send a janitor with bad knees up 72 flights of stairs every night just to sit in the dark with you." Alexander lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, ruined, alive. "I'm not fixable," he rasped. "Maybe not by you," she answered. "But I made a promise." He stared at her for a long, trembling moment. Then he wheeled backward, fast, clumsy, until the chair hit the glass wall. "Get out," he said, but the venom was gone. Only exhaustion remained. "Please. Just go." Naomi rose slowly. She didn't argue. At the elevator she paused. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said, same as every night. This time he didn't threaten her. The doors closed. Alexander sat in the bleeding red light until dawn, gun on the floor, candle burned down to nothing, the faint scent of frankincense lingering like forgiveness he wasn't ready to accept. He still wasn't ready. But for the first time in 3 years he wanted tomorrow to come. What's the kindest thing a stranger ever did for you when you were at your lowest? Share it below. Your story might be the light someone needs tonight. The blizzard hit Manhattan like God himself had decided to bury the city in silence. By Friday evening, all bridges and tunnels were closed. The mayor begged people to stay home. Kingston Tower, 72 stories of glass and steel, became an island in a white sea. The day staff had been sent home at noon. Only a skeleton crew remained, and even they were stuck. Alexander had planned to ride it out in his penthouse across town. The helicopter couldn't fly. The convoy of SUVs couldn't move. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Kingston was trapped by something money couldn't fix. At 9:14 p.m. the building's emergency loudspeaker crackled. "Attention all personnel. Due to extreme weather, the building is now on lockdown. Please proceed to the 43rd floor employee lounge for shelter, food, and cots. Repeat, all personnel to the 43rd floor." Alexander ignored it. He had a bedroom, a kitchen, and enough whiskey to last a month. He would stay on 72. But the heat on the upper floors began to fail, some valve frozen in the storm. The temperature in his office dropped fast. By midnight it was 52 degrees and falling. He told himself he didn't care. At 12:47 a.m. the private elevator opened without being called. Naomi stepped out wearing 3 sweaters, a wool hat pulled low over her locks, and carrying 2 steaming mugs. Snowflakes still clung to her lashes. "Building manager sent me," she said before he could snarl. "You come downstairs with the rest of us or they shut the generators off on the top 30 floors to conserve fuel. Your choice, Mr. Kingston." He stared at her, teeth chattering behind clenched jaw. "I have blankets. You'll have frostbite by morning." She set one mug on his desk. "Hot chocolate. Real cream. My mama's recipe. Drink." He didn't touch it. Naomi sighed, walked over and without asking, draped a thick quilt around his shoulders. Her fingers brushed the back of his neck, accidental, warm, alive. He flinched like she'd struck him. "I'm not leaving you up here to freeze," she said quietly. Alexander looked at the quilt, hand-stitched squares of faded calico. Something a grandmother would make. Something his daughter would have loved. His voice came out hoarse. "I don't belong down there. You belong wherever living people are tonight." He wanted to fight. He opened his mouth to wound her, to send her running. Instead what came out was, "I haven't been in a room with more than one person in 3 years." Naomi's eyes softened. "Then we'll start slow." She moved behind the chair, released the brakes he had locked in fury, and began pushing him toward the elevator before he could protest. The ride down was silent except for the storm howling outside the shaft. When the doors opened on 43, the employee lounge looked like a refugee camp. Cots lined the walls. A dozen night workers huddled around space heaters playing cards, sharing chips, laughing too loud because fear made them loud. Conversation died the moment Alexander rolled in. Naomi pushed him to the warmest corner, near the industrial coffee machine that still worked. Someone had dragged in an old couch. She parked him beside it, locked the wheels and spread another quilt over his legs. "Naomi," a security guard whispered, "you sure about this?" "He's human," she answered simply. Alexander sat rigid, staring at the floor, feeling every pair of eyes like needles. Naomi ignored the tension. She took the empty cot beside his chair, sat cross-legged, and started braiding a little girl's hair 2 cots over. Someone's daughter who'd been stuck with her mom. The child fell asleep mid-braid, head in Naomi's lap. Hours passed. People slowly relaxed. Someone offered Alexander a paper plate of lasagna warmed in the microwave. He shook his head. Naomi took it, ate half, then held the fork to his lips without ceremony. "Open." He obeyed before pride could stop him. The first bite tasted like childhood. At 3 a.m. the lights flickered. The generators groaned. Naomi stood. "Everybody pair up. Body heat. No arguments." She looked down at Alexander. He met her eyes, defeated, terrified, alive. "There's room on the couch," she said. He couldn't speak. She lifted the quilt, sat close enough that their shoulders touched and pulled the blanket over both of them. Her warmth bled into his side like sunlight through a cracked door. Minutes later the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the blue glow of emergency strips. Alexander's breath came shallow and fast. Naomi's hand found his under the quilt. She didn't squeeze. She simply rested her palm over his knuckles, steady, unafraid. "I'm right here," she whispered into the dark. "You're not alone tonight." His fingers turned slowly until they laced through hers. He held on like a drowning man. Across the room someone started humming, "His eye is on the sparrow." Others joined, soft and low. Alexander closed his eyes and for the first time since the crash, let himself be held by something stronger than grief. Outside the storm raged on. Inside in the dark 2 broken people shared one blanket and the first fragile threads of trust. When was the last time life forced you into a room with someone you never expected, and everything changed? Tell me below. Morning never really came. The blizzard just thinned to a gray-white haze. The generators coughed back to life around 6 a.m., and the lounge filled with the smell of burnt coffee and relief. Alexander woke with his head against Naomi's shoulder, her steady breathing rocking him like a boat. His hand was still locked in hers. He didn't move for a long time. When he finally pulled away, she let him go without comment, just offered a small, sleepy smile that made something inside him ache. The storm had paused, not ended. The city was paralyzed for at least another day. They were still trapped. By noon, the lounge had settled into a strange domestic rhythm. People napped, played cards, told stories to pass the hours. Alexander stayed on the couch, blanket around his shoulders, watching Naomi move among the others like a quiet shepherd, passing out the last of the granola bars, praying softly with a crying teenager whose phone had died, laughing with the security guards over some old joke. He couldn't stop watching her. At 2:17 p.m., the exact minute she used to arrive on 72, she came and sat beside him again. "You hungry?" she asked. He shook his head. Then, surprising them both, he asked, "What happened to your husband?" The room noise faded into a distant hum. Naomi looked down at her hands. The scar on her left palm caught the light. "Marcus," she said, voice soft but steady. "Multiple sclerosis. Diagnosed at 32. By 37 he couldn't walk, couldn't hold a spoon, couldn't breathe on his own some nights." She swallowed. "Insurance ran out. We lost the house. I cleaned offices by day, hospital floors by night so I could sit with him between shifts." Alexander's throat closed. "He used to say God forgot our address," she continued. "I told him God was just taking the long way around." Marcus laughed at that. He always laughed, even when the pain was so bad he bit through his lip. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed even. "One morning the nurse found him smiling in his sleep. I knew before they told me. He'd gone home." Silence wrapped them. Alexander stared at the floor. "I'm sorry." Naomi wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "He made me promise 2 things on his last lucid day. 1, keep singing no matter what. 2, if I ever saw somebody sitting where he sat, giving up, I was to sit with them until they remembered how to stand." She turned to him then, eyes fierce and tender at once. "That's why I kept coming back, Alexander. You're the promise I still get to keep." He couldn't breathe. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph in a cracked plastic sleeve. A younger Naomi, radiant in a simple white dress, standing beside a tall man in a navy suit, both of them laughing like the world could never touch them. Alexander took it with shaking fingers. "Marcus couldn't walk down the aisle," she said. "So he wheeled himself. And when the pastor asked who gives this woman, Marcus looked him dead in the eye and said, 'She's giving herself, sir. I'm just along for the ride.'" A broken sound escaped Alexander's chest, half laugh, half sob. Naomi tucked the photo away. "Your turn." He tried to look away. She waited. "I killed them," he whispered finally. Naomi didn't flinch. "The accident, everyone thinks it was the driver. It wasn't. I was arguing with Claire about the divorce papers. She wanted me to sign that night. I grabbed the wheel. Just for a second. Long enough." His voice splintered. Lillian was in the back seat singing "Twinkle, Twinkle." "I still hear it when it's quiet." Tears rolled down his face, hot and endless. "I had the best surgeons in Europe. They said maybe in 10 years with stem cells with luck, but I told them not to bother. I didn't deserve to walk away from what I did." Naomi let him cry until the storm inside him quieted. Then she did something that broke the last of his defenses. She reached under the couch, pulled out a small paper bag she'd hidden earlier, and took out a child's pink sneaker, tiny, scuffed, the Velcro frayed. Alexander's entire body went rigid. "I found it," she said gently, "in the lost and found on 60. Been there almost 3 years. Someone wrote LK on the inside in purple marker." He couldn't speak. Naomi placed the shoe in his lap like it was made of glass. "She was real, Alexander. And she's still your little girl. You don't get to erase her by punishing yourself forever." He cradled the shoe against his chest and sobbed like a man whose heart was being torn out and put back together all at once. Naomi wrapped her arms around him from the side, rocking him the way you rock a child awakened by nightmares. Minutes or hours later, he didn't know, he lifted his head. "I don't know how to live with it," he rasped. "You start," she whispered, "by letting somebody sit in the dark with you until the light feels safe again." Across the room, someone had started a phone video of the two of them, Naomi holding the broken billionaire while he clutched his dead daughter's shoe. By morning it would be viral, but right then none of that mattered. All that mattered was the tiny sneaker in his hands and the woman beside him who refused to let him die in the ashes. "What's one thing you've never told anyone about your worst day? You don't have to share details, just say, 'I'm carrying it too' in the comments if you want. You're not alone." The second night of the blizzard felt different. The lounge had become a village. Someone found an old guitar in a storage closet. Someone else produced a tiny speaker that still had battery. Children chased each other between cots. The air smelled of popcorn and hope. Alexander had not left the couch in 36 hours. He hadn't let go of the pink sneaker either. It sat on his lap like a sleeping bird. Naomi had never moved more than 10 feet from him. Around 9 p.m. the lights dimmed to conserve power, and the room settled into the soft glow of battery lanterns. The guitar player, a maintenance man named Luis, started strumming "Lean on Me." Naomi looked at Alexander. "Dance with me." He laughed, raw and incredulous. "Have you lost your mind?" "Not the kind of dance you're thinking." She stood, held out both hands. "Come on. Trust me one more time." People were watching, but gently now. The monster CEO had become just another storm-tossed soul. Alexander stared at her hands, calloused, steady, beautiful. Then he locked the brakes on his chair, took a breath that shook, and placed his palms in hers. Naomi pulled him forward until he was half standing, weight on his good right leg and both her shoulders. She was stronger than she looked. Slowly, carefully, she swayed them side to side, his dead legs dragging like anchors, her arms the only thing keeping him upright. It wasn't dancing. It was resurrection in miniature. Everyone in the room started singing softly. A few stood and swayed with invisible partners. Tears ran freely, but they were the good kind. Alexander buried his face in the curve of Naomi's neck and let the music carry what was left of him. When the song ended, she eased him back into the chair. He was trembling, exhilarated, terrified. "I felt that," he whispered against her collarbone. "In my spine. Like electricity." Naomi's eyes filled. "That's the first yes your body's given in 3 years." Later, when the room quieted and most people slept, Naomi pushed 2 cots together and made one wide bed. She climbed in fully clothed, opened her arms. Alexander hesitated only a moment before wheeling close, transferring himself with the grace of long practice, and lying down beside her. She pulled the quilts over them both. They lay face to face in the dim lantern light. "Thank you," he said, voice rough with everything he couldn't yet name. Naomi brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "You still think I'm crazy?" "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." She smiled, small and real. "Takes one to know one." He reached for her hand under the blanket. Their fingers laced like they'd been doing it for years. "Tell me something true," he whispered. Naomi thought for a long moment. "I used to be scared of thunderstorms," she said. "Marcus would hold me until I fell asleep. After he died, every storm felt like God reminding me I was alone." She looked at him, eyes shining. "Tonight I'm not scared at all." Alexander swallowed hard. "I used to love them." Claire hated the noise. "Lillian and I would sit on the terrace in Switzerland and count the seconds between lightning and thunder. She called it God's heartbeat." His voice cracked. "I haven't watched a storm since." Naomi lifted his hand, pressed her lips to his scarred knuckles. "Then let's watch this one together." She sat up, tugged him with her until they were side by side at the window. Snow still fell in thick, silent waves. Lightning flickered far away over the harbor. Alexander leaned his head against the cool glass. Naomi rested hers on his shoulder. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The city was gone, erased by white. Only they existed. He spoke so quietly she felt it more than heard it. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Naomi went very still. Alexander's heart hammered so hard he was sure she could feel it. "I know it's insane. I know you could do 1,000 times better than a broken man in a..." She turned, cupped his face in both hands and kissed him. It was soft, trembling, tasting of salt and hot chocolate and every unspoken prayer they'd carried for years. When they parted, foreheads still touching, she whispered against his lips. "You're not broken, Alexander Kingston. You're becoming." He laughed through fresh tears and kissed her again, deeper this time, like a man who'd forgotten he was allowed to want anything at all. They fell asleep eventually, tangled together under borrowed quilts, the pink sneaker tucked safely between them like a promise. Outside, the storm began to quiet. Inside, 2 hearts that had forgotten how to hope started beating in the same rhythm. And for the first time in 3 years, Alexander dreamed, not of fire and screaming tires, but of a little girl with pigtails running through a field of daisies, calling back over her shoulder, "Come on, Daddy, you can do it." He woke smiling. Naomi was already awake, watching him with wonder in her eyes. "Good dream?" she asked. "The best," he said and pulled her close again. "When was the moment you realized someone had quietly become your safe place? Tell me in the comments. These stories heal all of us." The blizzard broke at dawn on the 3rd day. Sunlight poured through the windows like mercy, turning the snow into blinding diamonds. The city exhaled. Plows growled back to life. Phones buzzed with returning signal. The world remembered Alexander Kingston existed. And the world wanted him back on its terms. By 8 a.m. his executive assistant, Priya, was already on the emergency sat phone arranging the helicopter, The press statement, the carefully worded narrative. Mr. Kingston bravely sheltered with staff during unprecedented storm. No comment on personal matters. By 9 a.m. the viral video had a title. Billionaire CEO cries in janitor's arms. The heartbreaking moment you need to see. By 9:30 a.m. it had 47 million views. Alexander saw it on someone's phone before Naomi did. The footage was grainy, taken from across the darkened lounge. Him sobbing into her neck, clutching the tiny pink sneaker while she rocked him. The caption read, "Poetic justice. Cold CO finally feels something." He went white. Naomi was in the kitchenette warming milk for a toddler when Priya, heeled boots, red lipstick, perfect armor, marched in with 2 security men and a tablet. "Alexander," Priya said, voice clipped, "the board is convening an emergency meeting. Stock dropped 4% overnight. We need you upstairs now. The helicopter lands in 20. Alexander's eyes found Naomi across the room. She was watching, milk pitcher frozen in her hand. Priya followed his gaze, lips thinning. "The woman in the video has been identified. HR is preparing termination papers for breach of privacy and, frankly, conduct unbecoming. She'll be escorted out." Naomi set the pitcher down slowly. Her face betrayed nothing. Alexander wheeled forward fast enough to nearly clip Priya's ankles. "Touch her and I swear to God." "Alexander," Priya cut in, softer now, pity sharpening the blade, "you've been through trauma. The world sees that. We'll spin this as PTSD, get you the best care, but you cannot be photographed with the cleaning staff. You're Alexander Kingston. Act like it." The room had gone deathly quiet. Every phone was up, recording the sequel. Naomi walked over, calm as Sunday morning. She knelt in front of his chair so only he could hear. "I never wanted your money or your name," she whispered. "I only wanted your heart to beat again. If keeping it means losing my job, I'll walk out that door right now and still thank God for these 3 days." Her eyes were steady, but tears trembled on her lashes. Alexander looked from her to Priya to the phones to the sneakers still tucked in his lap. Something inside him, something newborn and fragile, curled up and died. He heard his own voice, cold and distant, like it belonged to the man he used to be. "Escort Ms. Harper out," he said. "Give her severance. 2 years." Naomi's breath caught. Priya nodded, satisfied. "Security." 2 men stepped forward. Naomi stood slowly. She bent, pressed the softest kiss to the top of Alexander's head, like a mother saying goodbye to a child she'd never see again, and walked toward the elevator on her own. She didn't look back. The doors closed. Alexander stared at the empty space where she had been until Priya physically turned his chair toward the private exit. In the helicopter, Manhattan shrinking beneath him, he watched the footage again on the tablet Priya handed him. This time the polished version his PR team had already edited. They'd cropped Naomi out entirely. In their cut he was crying alone, dignified, tragic, marketable. He threw the tablet out the open door at 800 feet. Back in his penthouse, he locked himself in the gym that hadn't been used in 3 years. He transferred himself to the mat, dragged the useless legs behind him, and screamed until his voice gave out. Then he opened the drawer where he kept the gun. He sat with it in his lap for a long time. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Naomi, I'm not angry. I'm praying you choose life today. The promise still stands. I'll wait as long as it takes." He hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against marble. That night he drank until he couldn't feel his face. He woke on the bathroom floor at 4 a.m. with the gun in his hand and the barrel against his temple. He couldn't pull the trigger. Not because he was brave. Because the memory of her kiss on his forehead was stronger than the alcohol and the grief combined. He dropped the gun, curled into a ball, and sobbed like a child who just realized the monster under the bed had always been himself. Down in a cramped apartment in Flatbush, Naomi knelt by her bed, the same way she had every night since the storm. But tonight she didn't pray for Alexander to walk. She prayed for him to live long enough to forgive himself. And somewhere between those 2 prayers, the fragile thing they had built together shattered into 1,000 pieces too sharp to touch. 3 weeks. 21 days of silence that felt like 21 years. Alexander did not leave the penthouse. Food arrived on trays he didn't touch. The gun stayed in the drawer, but the drawer stayed open. Every morning his housekeeper found him asleep on the floor in the same clothes, the pink sneaker clutched to his chest like a teddy bear for a man who had forgotten how to be small. The board threatened to remove him. The tabloids called him the Broken King. His doctor prescribed new pills. He flushed them. At night he sat on the terrace in the cold, staring at the city he used to own, and replayed the moment he chose pride over her. He could still feel the ghost of her lips on his hair. On the 22nd morning, something arrived in a plain manila envelope. No return address, just his name written in careful, familiar handwriting. Inside, a single Polaroid and a folded sheet of yellow legal paper. The photo was from the blizzard night. Someone had snapped it while they slept on the joined cots. Naomi's head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped protectively around her, both of them peaceful in a way he no longer recognized. On the white border she had written in purple marker, "You looked like hope when you let yourself rest." The letter was longer. "Alexander, I'm not writing to beg. I'm writing because Marcus taught me that love doesn't shout, it just keeps the porch light on. I got fired. They were kind about it, 2 years severance, a good reference. I start a new job Monday, day shift at a women's shelter in the Bronx. The kids there need someone who knows what rock bottom feels like. I still wake up at 2:17 a.m. every night. My body thinks I'm climbing 72 flights to find you. I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm asking you to love yourself enough to try again. One step. One day. One breath. The promise is still yours if you ever want it. I'll be at St. Gabriel's on Livonia Avenue this Sunday, 11 a.m. service. Same pew Marcus and I sat in for 15 years, third from the back left side. If you come I'll be there. If you don't I'll understand. Either way I will keep praying the way I promised. You once asked me if I believe God sees. I do. And he sees you right now, exactly where you are, and he is not ashamed. Be angry. Be scared. Just don't stay gone. I love you. I probably always will. Naomi. P.S. I kept the mate to the pink sneaker. Figured a little girl somewhere might need both one day. He read it 17 times. Then he wheeled to the full-length mirror he had avoided for 3 years and looked, really looked, at the man staring back. Sunken eyes. Unshaven. Shirt wrinkled. Defeated. He hated him. And for the first time he wanted to fight for him. Saturday night he called the only physical therapist who had ever stood up to him. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the one he had fired for saying, "Maybe one day." She answered on the third ring. "I was wondering when you'd get tired of dying," she said without greeting. "I need help," he rasped. "I'll be there at 6 a.m., she replied. "Bring the janitor's phone number. You're going to need her." Sunday morning, 10:43 a.m. Alexander stood at the doors of St. Gabriel's in Brownsville for the first time in his life. Actually stood. Leg braces hidden under tailored trousers, forearm crutches disguised as canes, pain shooting fire up both legs with every heartbeat. He had not taken a single unassisted step in 1,137 days. The usher, an older woman with kind eyes, started to fetch a wheelchair. "No," he said, voice shaking but clear. "I'm walking in today." He made it down the aisle one agonizing step at a time, sweat soaking his shirt, teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. People stared. Some recognized him. Phones came out. He didn't care. Third pew from the back left side. Naomi sat alone, head bowed in prayer, Sunday hat the color of sunrise. He stopped beside her pew, breathing like he'd run a marathon. She looked up. Her face went through 1,000 emotions in 1 second. Shock, fear, joy, terror that it wasn't real. Alexander lowered himself slowly, painfully, until he was sitting beside her. Their eyes locked. "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm late. I'm terrified. I'm still broken in 100 places. But I'm here." Naomi's tears fell silently. The choir began the opening hymn, "Just a Closer Walk with Thee." Alexander reached for her hand with trembling fingers. She took it like she had been waiting her entire life to do it again.